The massive viewing screen in the United Earth Defense Command showed the approaching alien ships. Admiral James Wilson stood straight, his weathered hands clasped behind his back. After decades of wondering if humanity was alone in the universe, they'd finally had their answer. "Sir, they're broadcasting on all frequencies," Lieutenant Tom reported from his station. "They're calling themselves the Galactic Council." Wilson nodded, his gray eyes fixed on the elegant vessels that looked more like abstract art than warships. "Accept their transmission." The next few weeks passed in a blur of diplomatic exchanges, cultural sharing, and technological demonstrations. The Council, it turned out, was an alliance of 15 spacefaring species who governed most of the known galaxy. They had been watching Earth for some time, waiting until humanity achieved faster-than-light travel to make contact. Now, 2 months later, Wilson found himself standing in the Grand Chamber of Voices, the heart of Galactic Council politics. The circular room stretched hundreds of meters high, with floating platforms holding representatives from each member species. The air hummed with translation fields, converting every language into something all could understand. "So, High Commander Thex of the Thorian Empire spoke, his scaled face displayed on massive holograms around the chamber. "These are the weapons your species uses for defense." His voice carried a tone of amusement that made Wilson's jaw tighten. "Yes," Wilson replied simply. The holographic display in the center of the chamber showed various human military weapons, rifles, artillery, and ship-mounted railguns. "Our primary military technology focuses on kinetic energy weapons, enhanced by our advances in propulsion and materials science." A ripple of laughter echoed through the chamber. Wilson noticed even the usually stoic Council President Lyra hiding a smile behind her hand. "Projectile weapons," Thex continued, barely containing his mirth. "You mean to tell us that your species still throws metal at your enemies?" This time, the laughter was louder, more open. "We abandoned such primitive methods thousands of years ago." A hologram appeared next to the human weapons display. It showed a thorian energy rifle, its elegant curves glowing with contained plasma. "This is a standard-issue weapon for our forces," Thex explained, though his tone suggested he was speaking to a child. "It fires concentrated energy bolts that can pierce any known material. The energy can be adjusted for different effects: stun, destroy, or disintegrate." Wilson watched as more council members displayed their own energy-based weapons, each one more elaborate than the last, each demonstration accompanied by barely concealed condescension. "Admiral Wilson," President Lyra spoke, her voice gentle but patronizing. "Please understand, we mean no offense. It's just surprising to see a spacefaring race still relying on such basic technology. Perhaps we could arrange for some technology transfers to help Earth's military modernize." Wilson took a deep breath. He thought about the extensive testing Earth's military had done, about the simulations they'd run using the limited data they had on Council technology. He thought about saying something, about explaining the principles of kinetic energy versus energy shields, about the raw physics that made human weapons uniquely dangerous. Instead, he smiled politely. "We appreciate the offer, President Lyra. However, Earth is comfortable with our current defense systems." "Comfortable with obsolescence," Thex barked, triggering another round of laughter. "Tell me, Admiral, what do you expect these primitive weapons to do against modern energy shields? Against ships that can absorb and redirect energy attacks?" Wilson maintained his diplomatic smile. "We hope we never have to find out, High Commander." The council session continued, moving on to other matters: trade agreements, spatial boundaries, technological exchange protocols. Throughout it all, Wilson could hear the occasional whispered joke, see the looks of pity and amusement directed his way. As he prepared to leave the chamber, Wilson overheard 2 junior representatives talking. "Can you believe they still use gunpowder and rails to launch projectiles? It's like bringing a stone axe to a fusion reactor." Wilson said nothing. Earth had run the numbers. Earth had done the tests. Earth knew exactly what their primitive weapons could do to energy shields and hulls that had never been designed to handle good old-fashioned kinetic impacts. He just hoped the Council would never have to find out firsthand. Dr. Grant stood before his research terminal, his three-fingered hands moving quickly over the holographic controls. As the Council's leading weapons analyst, he had spent the last 3 months studying footage of human military exercises. What he saw troubled him deeply. "Computer, play exercise sequence 47 again," he commanded. The air in front of him lit up with images of human warships performing battle maneuvers. His eyes narrowed as he watched their railguns turning, tracking invisible targets with precision that seemed impossible for such primitive weapons. A soft chime announced a visitor. "Enter," Dr. Grant called out, not taking his eyes off the display. Commander Vex of the Council Security Force walked in, his metallic boots clicking against the floor. "Another late night studying the humans, Doctor." "Look at this," Dr. Grant pointed to the display. "Their targeting systems are far more advanced than we initially thought. And these new rail guns they're testing, they're not simple metal throwers." The display showed a human destroyer firing at an asteroid. The impact didn't just crack the rock, it shattered it completely. The computer's analysis showed the projectile had been traveling at nearly 30% of light speed. "Impressive for primitives," Commander Vex admitted. "But against our energy shields." "That's just it," Dr. Grant interrupted, pulling up another display. "Our shields are designed to deflect and absorb energy weapons. They spread the impact across the entire shield surface. But these human weapons—" He paused the footage. "They don't work like that. They deliver all their force to a single point." In his private chambers, High Commander Vex reviewed Dr. Grant's report with growing irritation. "More concerns about the humans. This is becoming an obsession, Doctor." "High Commander, please," Dr. Grant insisted. "Their weapons development is accelerating. They're not just maintaining their kinetic weapon systems, they're improving them. The latest intel shows they're developing something they call mass drivers for their larger ships." Vex waved a scaled hand dismissively. "Bigger guns that throw bigger rocks. How primitive can they be? Next, you'll tell me they're dangerous because they're making their stones sharper. Sir, with respect, you're not understanding the physics involved. At the speeds they're achieving." "Enough." Vex's voice boomed through the chamber. "I've heard enough about these humans and their obsolete weapons. The Thorian Empire has faced thousands of species across the galaxy. None have ever penetrated our shields. None ever will." Later that day, Dr. Grant sat in the Council's military archive, reviewing historical footage. The scenes showed various species throughout history attempting to use kinetic weapons against energy shields. Each attempt had failed, but something was different about those old weapons. "Computer, compare velocities of historical kinetic weapons with current human rail gun systems." The results made him catch his breath. The difference wasn't just significant, it was astronomical. The humans weren't just throwing rocks, they were throwing them harder and faster than any species in Council records had ever attempted. He drafted another report, this time to President Lyra herself. He included all his calculations, all his concerns. The response came back within hours. "While your diligence is appreciated, we cannot justify allocating additional resources to study technology that the Council abandoned millennia ago." That evening, Dr. Grant watched new footage from Earth's space. They were building more ships, each equipped with multiple rail gun batteries. The humans worked with a quiet efficiency that worried him more than any loud display of force would have. "Computer, send a private message to Commander Vex," he said finally. Tell him to start running simulations of kinetic impacts on our shield systems, and mark it urgent." As he prepared to leave his lab, one last image caught his eye. A human news broadcast showing their newest warship. Its rail guns were nearly twice the size of previous models, and its hull bore the name Determination. Dr. Grant felt a chill run down his spine. The Council wasn't just ignoring the warning signs, They were laughing at them. And somehow, he knew that laughter would come back to haunt them all. The mining colony on Europa was supposed to be peaceful. Instead, Admiral Wilson found himself staring at yet another report of Thorian ships patrolling dangerously close to human settlements. This was the 5th such incident this week. "They're testing our patience," Captain Rogers said, standing beside Wilson's desk. "Their ships are getting bolder. Yesterday they came within firing range of the Europa colony." Wilson studied the holographic display showing Thorian ship movements. Their pattern was clear. They were slowly pushing into human space, one sector at a time. "What's the status of our fleet deployment?" "All ships are in position, sir, just like you ordered, hiding in the asteroid fields and behind the larger moons. The Thorians haven't spotted them yet." Rogers paused. "They still think we only have a handful of destroyers protecting our colonies." Wilson nodded slowly. After the Council's dismissal of human weapons, he had convinced Earth's leadership to play into their expectations. Let them think humanity was weak. Let them think Earth was defenseless. In the Galactic Council chamber, the atmosphere was tense. President Lyra listened as the human representative filed another formal complaint about Thorian activities. "These are routine patrols," High Commander Thex argued, his scaled face showing no concern. "The Thorian Empire has every right to protect its interests in neighboring sectors." "Neighboring sectors," the human representative countered. "You're 15 light-years from your closest colony. You've moved your ships through 3 neutral zones to reach our space. Are you accusing the mighty Thorian Empire of aggressive action?" Thex's voice carried a dangerous edge. "Perhaps if Earth had proper defensive capabilities, you wouldn't feel so threatened by routine military exercises." Back on Earth, Wilson received an urgent transmission from Dr. Grant. The Council scientist looked worried, even through the encrypted channel. "Admiral, you need to know. The Thorians are planning something big. They've moved their newest dreadnought, the Imperial Dawn, to the edge of your space. It's their most powerful warship." "Thank you, Doctor," Wilson replied calmly. "We've been tracking it since it left their shipyards." Dr. Grant looked surprised. "You have? But our stealth technology is very impressive," Wilson finished for him. "But you'd be amazed what good old-fashioned telescopes can spot when you know where to look." After the transmission ended, Wilson called an emergency meeting with Earth's Defense Council. The room was quiet as he laid out the situation. "The Thorians think they can intimidate us because they believe our weapons are primitive," he explained. "They've positioned their forces exactly where we predicted they would." He brought up a tactical display showing both Thorian and hidden human ship positions. "All we need now is to wait for them to make their move." On the Thorian dreadnought, Imperial Dawn, High Commander Thex prepared his fleet. "These humans need to learn their place in the galaxy," he told his officers. "Their continued refusal to accept Council technology is an insult to our civilization." "Sir," one of his officers spoke up, "shouldn't we be concerned about their weapons?" Dr. Grant's reports. "Those reports were written by a scared old scientist who gives primitives too much credit," Thex snapped. "Their metal-throwing weapons are toys compared to our energy cannons. Now, prepare the fleet for our next patrol. Let's see how these humans react when we test their defenses around Mars." In his office on Earth, Wilson received one final message from Dr. Grant. "Admiral, please, whatever you're planning, be careful. The Thorians have never lost a war." Wilson smiled slightly as he typed his response. "There's a first time for everything, Doctor." He looked out his window at the night sky, where somewhere humanity's fleet waited silently among the asteroids and moons. The Thorians thought they were dealing with primitive savages who would bow to intimidation. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. "Send the order to all ships," he told his communications officer. "Operation Silent Thunder is now active. The moment the Thorians cross the Mars defense line, they'll learn exactly what our primitive weapons can do." The mining colony on Mars' outer moon, Deimos, never stood a chance. The Thorian warships appeared from hyperspace, their energy weapons blazing with purple fire. Within minutes, the colony's outer structures were in ruins. High Commander Thex watched from the bridge of the Imperial Dawn. Send the message to Earth again. Let them see how helpless their colonies are against real weapons. In Earth's Defense Command Center, Admiral Wilson watched the attack with an eerily calm expression. The room was silent except for the incoming distress signals from Deimos. "Sir," Captain Rogers waited for orders, his hand hovering over the command console. "The Thorians have crossed the Mars defense line." Wilson nodded slowly. "Send the signal. Authorization code. Newton's third law." Hidden among the asteroids near Mars, the human destroyer Thunderchild received the command. Captain Jane Miller smiled as she gave the order. "All hands. Battle stations. Unmask main weapons and power up the railguns." On the Imperial Dawn's bridge, an officer suddenly shouted, "Commander, energy spike detected from the asteroid field." "What?" Thex turned to the sensor display. "Impossible. Our scans showed nothing but rocks." The space around his fleet lit up as human warships emerged from their hiding places. The Thunderchild fired first. Its massive railgun split the darkness with a flash of electromagnetic energy, launching a projectile at a significant fraction of light speed. The Thorian officers watched in horror as the round crossed the space between ships in less than a second. Their shields, designed to disperse energy weapons, did nothing to stop the solid tungsten round. It punched through the lead cruiser like paper, the kinetic energy turning the proud warship into expanding debris. Shields had no effect. An officer screamed, "Hull breach on decks 1 through 12. Before Thex could process what had happened, the Thunderchild fired again. Another Thorian cruiser erupted in flames as the hypersonic projectile tore through its reactor core. "Impossible." Thex slammed his fist on his command console. "Their primitive weapons can't." "Sir," his tactical officer interrupted. 3 more human ships detected. They're targeting our flagship." In Earth's command center, Wilson watched the battle unfold. "Send word to all ships. Execute attack pattern Delta. Show them exactly what our primitive weapons can do." The Thunderchild and its sister ships moved in perfect formation, their rail guns speaking in deadly harmony. Each shot was precisely calculated, each impact devastating. The Thorians' energy shields, the pride of their fleet, might as well have been paper against the kinetic force of human weapons. On the Council homeworld, Dr. Grant burst into President Lyra's chamber. "Madam President, the Thorians, their fleet at Mars." Lyra looked up from her desk. "What about it?" 3 human ships just destroyed half their attack force. Their kinetic weapons, they're penetrating Thorian shields like they don't even exist. In space, the battle continued. The Imperial Dawn's energy weapons lashed out at the human ships. But they were ready. Their hulls, reinforced with materials developed over centuries of weapons testing, absorbed or deflected the energy beams. "Status report," Thex demanded as his flagship shuddered from another near miss. 6 ships lost, Commander. 4 more heavily damaged. The humans, they're not even using their full force. They're picking us apart." The Thunderchild's next shot grazed the Imperial Dawn's bow, tearing away armor plating and weapon emplacements. The message was clear. The humans could have destroyed the flagship, but they were choosing not to. Admiral Wilson's voice came over all frequencies. "This is Earth Defense Command to Thorian forces. That was a demonstration. The next salvo will not be a warning. Withdraw from human space immediately." In the stunned silence that followed, High Commander Thex stared at the tactical display. His mighty fleet, which had never known defeat, was in ruins. Destroyed not by advanced energy weapons or exotic technology, but by primitive human guns. "Order the retreat," he whispered, his pride shattered like his fleet. "Get us out of here." As the remaining Thorian ships flowed into hyperspace, Captain Miller sent a brief message to Earth. "Thunderchild to command. Enemy fleet neutralized." The council's laughter just died in their throats. The council chamber had never been so quiet. On the main display, footage from the Battle of Mars played on repeat. Everyone watched as human railguns tore through Thorian ships like paper. No one was laughing anymore. President Lyra turned to Dr. Grant, who stood at the center of the chamber. "You tried to warn us, Doctor. Perhaps we should have listened. The humans aren't done," Dr. Grant replied, bringing up new tactical displays. After destroying half the Thorian attack fleet, they launched a counter-offensive. Their ships are moving with purpose, targeting key Thorian military installations. The displays showed human warships emerging from hyperspace near Thorian bases. Each attack followed the same pattern: precise, devastating strikes from railguns that no energy shield could stop. The mighty Thorian Empire, undefeated for 1,000 years, was being systematically dismantled. In his command ship, High Commander Thex watched another fortress fall to human weapons. "How?" he demanded. "How are they targeting our bases so accurately?" His intelligence officer spoke up nervously. "Sir, we think they've been watching us for months. Those primitive telescopes they use. They've mapped our entire defense network." On Earth, Admiral Wilson coordinated the offensive from the Defense Command Center. Holographic displays showed human fleets moving through space, striking Thorian targets with surgical precision. "Status report," he ordered. Captain Rogers stepped forward. "Thunderchild and her battle group have destroyed the Thorian shipyards in the Centauri sector. The Mars fleet is moving to neutralize their forward bases. No casualties on our side yet, sir. Their energy weapons still can't penetrate our armor." "And the new data?" "Every shot teaches us more about their shield technology," Rogers replied. "Our targeting computers are getting better at finding weak points. We're now achieving shield penetration with 98% of our shots." The news spread quickly through the galaxy. Species that had once mocked human weapons now scrambled to understand them. Council engineers worked desperately to develop defenses against kinetic weapons, but centuries of focusing solely on energy-based technology had left them vulnerable. In a secret council session, representatives from various races met to discuss the crisis. "The Thorians have lost 12 major bases," one member reported. "Their mighty dreadnoughts are being hunted down by ships a quarter of their size. Human railgun technology has changed everything." "We need those weapons," another member insisted. "My people have already drafted a trade proposal." "Your people?" a third member interrupted. "Half the council is trying to establish weapons trades with Earth. They're being very selective about who they talk to." President Lyra watched the debate with growing concern. She turned to Dr. Grant, who stood beside her. "Doctor, you studied their technology. How did we miss this?" Dr. Grant shook his head. "We were arrogant. We assumed that because we had moved beyond kinetic weapons, they were inherently inferior. We never considered that humans might perfect them instead of abandoning them." A new alert flashed across the chamber's displays. The human fleet had just taken out the Thorians' largest military installation. The base's energy shields, which could have withstood days of bombardment from energy weapons, had failed in minutes against concentrated rail gunfire. "They're not just winning," Dr. Grant observed. "They're revolutionizing warfare. Every race that laughed at their primitive weapons is now racing to copy them." In Earth's Defense Command, Admiral Wilson received offers of surrender from 3 more Thorian systems. On his display, he could see council races scrambling to establish diplomatic channels with Earth. Everyone wanted human weapon technology now. "Funny how things change," Captain Rogers commented. "A few months ago, they thought our guns were jokes. Now they're begging to learn our primitive ways." Wilson allowed himself a small smile. Sometimes the old ways are the best ways, and sometimes those who laugh first end up learning the hardest lessons. Across the galaxy, the message was clear. Humanity's primitive weapons had changed the balance of power forever. The age of energy weapon superiority was over, ended by the very weapons the Council had mocked. The emergency Council session was the largest in galactic history. Every member race had sent their highest-ranking representatives. Even species that usually attended via hologram had come in person. Nobody wanted to miss this historic moment. Admiral Wilson stood at the center of the chamber, in the same spot where the Council had once laughed at human weapons. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The Thorian Empire has officially requested peace talks, President Lyra announced to the gathered representatives. They have withdrawn all forces from human space and ask for an immediate ceasefire. High Commander Thex, his proud bearing now diminished, stepped forward. The Thorian Empire acknowledges its error in judgment. We seek peaceful relations with Earth and request they halt their offensive. Wilson glanced at the tactical display, showing the current state of the conflict. In just 2 weeks, humanity's primitive weapons had destroyed 30% of the Thorian military infrastructure. Their mighty empire was on the verge of collapse. Earth will accept the ceasefire, Wilson stated clearly, on 3 conditions. The chamber went silent. Everyone knew that humans were now in a position to make demands. First, the Thorian Empire will pay for all damage done to human colonies, Wilson continued. Second, they will reduce their military presence along our borders. Third, he paused. Looking around the chamber, the Council will establish new protocols for evaluating new member species and their technologies. Dr. Grant, standing near President Lyra, nodded in approval. The humans weren't just winning the war, they were changing how the galaxy thought about technology. I second this proposal. A representative from the Mercator Alliance stood up. My people request a formal technology exchange with Earth. We offer our advanced medical knowledge in return for kinetic weapon designs. The Stellars Confederation also seeks technology exchange. Another representative called out. Soon, the chamber was filled with voices as various races tried to establish diplomatic ties with Earth. President Lyra raised her hands for silence, one at a time. Earth has demonstrated not only military might, but also tactical wisdom. They deserve our respect, not our desperation. From his position, Wilson watched as the same council members who had mocked human weapons now competed for Earth's attention. But his focus remained on the bigger picture. Earth is willing to establish limited technology exchanges, he announced. But we have conditions. Any race that wants our weapons technology must first prove they can use it responsibly. In the back of the chamber, various military leaders studied footage of human railguns in action. They had finally realized that humanity hadn't stuck with primitive weapons out of ignorance. They had perfected them into something devastating. There's another matter, Dr. Grant spoke up. Our analysis shows that combining human kinetic weapons with Council energy technology could lead to significant advancements. Perhaps it's time for true cooperation rather than mockery. The idea sparked immediate interest. Representatives began discussing the possibilities of hybrid weapons, combining the raw power of human railguns with the precision of energy targeting systems. High Commander Thex, watching his empire's influence fade, finally understood his mistake. We thought ourselves superior because our technology was newer, he admitted quietly. We forgot that older doesn't always mean worse. As the session continued, Wilson met privately with President Lyra and her advisors. Earth doesn't seek dominance, he explained. We want partnership, but partnership based on mutual respect, not arrogance. Lyra nodded thoughtfully. The Council has learned its lesson. Admiral, your primitive weapons didn't just change military doctrine. They changed how we think about progress itself. Outside the chamber, news of the peace talks spread across the galaxy. Species that had once looked down on Earth now sought its friendship. The term primitive weapons disappeared from diplomatic language, replaced by kinetic technology. The galaxy was changing, and at its heart was a simple truth. Sometimes the oldest solutions were the best ones. Humanity had proven that progress didn't always mean abandoning the past. Sometimes it meant perfecting it. 1 year after the Thorian conflict, the galaxy was a very different place. Admiral Wilson stood in the newly built Earth Embassy on the Council homeworld, watching ships pass through the space lanes outside his window. Among the sleek energy-powered vessels, he could now see the distinctive shapes of human-designed ships from various council races. Quite a change from last year, Dr. Grant said, joining him at the window. The council scientist had become Earth's strongest ally in the past months. Hard to believe they once laughed at human technology. Wilson nodded, turning to the holographic display showing the latest developments across the galaxy. How's the hybrid weapons project coming along? Better than expected. Dr. Grant brought up the test results. Combining human rail gun technology with council energy systems has created something entirely new. The accuracy of energy targeting with the punch of kinetic weapons. The display showed the new hybrid destroyers being built in shipyards across council space. Their designs merged the best of both worlds: human practical engineering and council advanced technology. In another part of the council building, President Lyra led a session of the New Technology Evaluation Board. Created after the Thorian conflict, its purpose was to prevent the council from dismissing unfamiliar technologies as primitive. The latest reports from Earth's technology sharing program are impressive, she announced to the gathered representatives. 20 member races have now successfully integrated kinetic weapon systems into their defense forces. High Commander Thex, now serving as a military advisor rather than a combat leader, added his own report. The combined fleet exercises have shown remarkable results. Ships using hybrid weapon systems are showing combat effectiveness far beyond our previous standards. The Thorian Empire, though diminished, had found a new role in the galaxy. Their experience had taught them humility, and they now helped other races avoid the same mistakes they had made. Back in his office, Wilson reviewed messages from Earth. The planet had changed too. Humanity's position in the galaxy had grown far beyond what anyone had expected. Their primitive technology had revolutionized warfare, but more importantly, it had revolutionized how different species worked together. Admiral, Captain Rogers entered with a new report. The first graduating class from the Combined Military Academy is ready. We have students from 12 different council races who've completed their training in human warfare tactics. Wilson smiled. The academy had been his idea, a place where species could learn from each other rather than mock their differences. How are they adapting to our style of thinking? Surprisingly well, sir. Turns out, once you stop laughing at something, you can learn a lot from it. In the council's main research facility, Dr. Grant led a team of scientists from various races. They worked on projects that would have seemed impossible a year ago, combining ancient principles with advanced technology in ways that pushed the boundaries of what was possible. The council's greatest mistake, he told his team, wasn't in choosing energy weapons over kinetic ones. It was in thinking we had to choose at all. The new hybrid ships proved his point. They carried rail guns that could punch through any defense, guided by energy targeting systems of unprecedented precision. Their hulls used human-designed armor enhanced by council shield technology. They represented not just a new type of weapon, but a new way of thinking. As Wilson prepared for another council session, he thought about how far they'd come. The galaxy had learned that progress wasn't a straight line from primitive to advanced. Sometimes the old ways still had value. Sometimes the best path forward was to look back. Ready for the session, Admiral? Dr. Grant asked. Wilson nodded, picking up his datapad. Today they would vote on admitting 3 new species to the council. Species that, just a year ago, might have been dismissed as primitive. The galaxy's changing, Doctor, Wilson said as they walked to the chamber. And this time, nobody's laughing at anyone else's technology. As they entered the council chamber, Wilson saw representatives from dozens of worlds working together, sharing ideas, building something new. The council had learned its lesson well. Never judge a weapon by its age, and never underestimate a species that chooses to perfect the basics rather than abandon them. The galaxy had found a new balance, built on respect rather than ridicule. And it all started because someone laughed at human guns until they fired.